Hello, welcome to Papa Nick's Music. I am, as always, your host, Papa Nick Lewis, and today we've got our penultimate episode in my Neil Innes arc. Several weeks ago, I started this Neil Innes series. I put Neil Innes on my Mount Rushmore of songwriters. He's the second head on my Mount Rushmore. Randy Newman is head number one. Neil Innes is head number two. And I've been trying to make the case that we should all have more Neil Innes art in our lives. And I started with a ranking of the Bonzo Dog Doodah Band albums. Then I followed up with my 10 favorite Ruttles songs. Today I'm going to talk about Neil as an artist, a man ahead of his time with wonderful foresight. And then next week I'll wrap up my Neil Innes fixation with my top 10. I might do a top 10 plus 10. We'll see about that. I was originally planning to do the top 10 this week, but I only recently, relatively speaking, managed to get a copy of his last album, Nearly Really, from 2019. I mean, the year that he passed, he had released this. And while I've heard the album before, I haven't had time in the last week and a half since I've gotten it to really comb through it and listen carefully. So that's my homework for this week, so that I can put these songs into the context of the overall catalog. And I just want to say, if you are interested in getting a copy of this, if you are even remotely, you think you might be interested, maybe, go to nearlyreally.com and you can pick up a copy of this. You'll be buying it directly from Neil's family. They'll even include a little postcard, which Yvonne, Neil's wife, will sign. As much as possible, I think we need to start buying our music directly from our musicians. The folks at Amazon are not going to like to hear me say that. Anyway, we're going to talk more about the music next week. This week, I want to talk about Neil Innes as visionary artist, which means this week I don't have to do the subjectivity notice. Ooh. None of this is opinion. This is all matter of record. This is all matter of fact. This is all, you can look it up. You can read it in books. I'm not making this stuff up. I'm not pulling it out of my ass the way I normally do. One of the things I really like about Neil Innes is he's cutting edge of the blade. I mean, super cutting edge in the work that he does, in the work that he did. And I'm going to focus just on a period of time, the mid to late 70s, in that era. Now, I will be honest, a couple of these, I'm going to talk about three things, three projects, that he's involved in that are ahead of their time. And he's involved in two of them, but the third one is all him, so it gets stronger as we go. First, I'm a huge fan of comedy. If you are a long-time watcher, you know that I have a sporadic, occasional Wednesday series where I talk about comedy, because it's comedy and music. These are the soundtrack of my life. These are the lenses through which I see my life. And I've always been a big fan of sketch comedy. My favorite sketch comedy show of all time is, hands down, SCTV. I loved SCTV. Oh my God, Second City Television. When SCTV when it first started, it was created by a couple of guys who were like administrators, producers for the Second City group that was in Toronto, and several of the performers in Toronto. And they're all sitting around shooting the shit one day, talking about what they could do in terms of a TV show. Saturday Night Live was out and was getting popular, and they were with the Saturday. Lorne Michaels was poaching Second City like nobody's business to get these people in to perform for him. And the Second City folks thought, well, we've already got the folks to do this. Let's figure out a way we can do a TV show. And so the Toronto Second City group came up with SCTV. which was the idea of SCTV is, the conceit of it is that this is a broadcasting day in a small TV station in Mellonville. When it first started, Mellonville was just a fictional Canadian town. After the show got picked up by NBC, it became a fictional American town, but it was North American, it wasn't super heavily dependent on being in a specific location. But because it was a broadcast day, that meant that they could do anything. They could do sketches about TV shows. They could do sketches about, like different kinds of TV shows, cop shows, comedies, talk shows. They could do sketches about commercials. They could do movie parodies. I mean, floodgates were open. You could do anything you wanted to do if the structure of your show is the broadcast day of a small TV show. And the fact, or small TV network, and the fact that it's a small TV network kind of gives you an out when you're doing this on a shoestring budget and you don't really have much in the way of money for sets and that sort of stuff. Okay, well, yeah, it's because it's a small town. And when I first watched SCTV, I thought, oh man, this is fantastic. I'd never seen anything like that before. But of course, there was something like that before. SCTV was conceived in the spring of 1976, went into production later that year. The first episode was aired in the fall of 1976, September, October, that neighborhood somewhere. A year before, in 1975, the first episode of Rutland Weekend Television was aired. Rutland Weekend Television, which was the brainchild of Eric Idle, and for which Neil Innes wrote music, was a day in the life at this small British television station, because it served the smallest county in Britain. Or the smallest county in England, excuse me. It was going to have the smallest budget. Everything I just said about SCTV applies to Rutland Weekend Television, but Rutland Weekend Television was out a year plus earlier. These guys were ahead of their time. Second instance of Neil Innes being ahead of the curve. In 1984, a movie was released. Comedy. Very popular comedy. It took a while to build an audience because people didn't really know how to take it. They weren't sure about this thing, but after a while it became a cult classic and is now widely regarded as one of the best comedies. Definitely of the 80s, if not like all time. I mean, it's a Grand Champion Hall of Famer, critical favorite comedy. Everybody loves This Is Spinal Tap, and I'm no different. I love this movie. I think it's a wonderful movie, but in multiple interviews, the director Rob Reiner and the three stars, Chris Guest, Michael McKean, and Harry Shearer, have all talked about how they were responsible for, they aren't using the word inventing, but man, skirting awfully close to it, the idea of a mockumentary that has improvised dialogue along with musical pastiche, right? These musical spoofs. And again, I'm not shitting on This Is Spinal Tap. It's a wonderful movie. I loved the movie. I had a copy of the album. I don't know if I've still got it, but I'm pretty sure I do. Hey, nothing but thumbs up from me as far as This Is Spinal Tap goes. But first off, no, they didn't create mockumentaries. Mockumentaries have been around almost as long as people have been making movies. So there's nothing particularly special with it being a mockumentary. A mockumentary about music with improvised dialogue. Well, that was done in 1978 with All You Need Is Cash. Technically, All You Need Is Cash, directed by Eric Idle and Gary Weiss, was written by written by Eric Idle. But it was written by Eric Idle the same way This Is Spinal Tap was written by Rob Reiner, Chris Guest, Michael McKean, and Harry Shearer, right? It's Eric Idle had the idea for the story arc. And yes, some of it is scripted. The narrator bits, the segues, the bit with every time Eric Idle is pretending to be the narrator of the documentary, speaking directly into the camera, that stuff was scripted. The bit, my favorite side gag in the whole thing, when he's out in front of the rat killer and he's talking and he looks and he sees the rat on his shoulder and goes, yeah. That was scripted. But every interview with the Ruddles, that was all improvised. Every interview with all of the celebrity people who were opining about the Paul Simon and Mick Jagger, all of that stuff, that was all improvised. The people who were doing this knew what their marks were. They knew the point they were trying to get across, but it was left up to them how to do it. And in some cases, they weren't even given a mark to hit. Neil Innes has talked in interviews about one of the things that he was the most proud of when they were filming this movie was there's a scene where Ron Nasty and his new wife, Hitler's daughter, are in a bathtub with a shower running, and Eric Idle, the narrator of the documentary, is asking them why they're in the shower, lightly spoofing the bed in for peace, right? And Nasty has this thing about how civilization is just pipes, and we're using the plumbing to get the message to the he has this little spiel that he does, and he was very proud of that, largely because when he got through it, he didn't know he was going to say it until Eric Idle asked the question, and that's like, yeah, he had to come up with something, and so he came up with this elaborate, civilization is a series of pipes. And at the very end of it, Eric Idle started laughing before they could cut away from it. So he had to redo it to get the laugh out. That stuff was all improvised. All of the funny interviews with the Ruddles and all of that was all improvised. This Is Spinal Tap did not create the improvised mockumentary music movie. Now, you can make a really strong argument that Christopher Guest went on to perfect that with A Mighty Wind. But All You Need Is Cash came first. Now, both of these things, when we're talking about Rutland Weekend Television and the outgrowth of Rutland Weekend Television, or one of the outgrowths of Rutland Weekend Television, All You Need Is Cash, I'm comfortable saying that Neil Innes was ahead of his time because he was actively involved in these projects. Probably have to give the lion's share for the creative vision. You probably have to give the lion's share for the creative vision to Eric Idle. But one of the things, going back to Rutland Weekend Television, one of the things about that was unusual was that they had Neil Innes' music. Neil Innes wrote music specifically for Rutland Weekend Television. That's why he was there. Eric said to Neil, I want you to come do this show with me because I want it to have music. I want you to do the music for it. Neil was originally reluctant to do Rutland Weekend Television because his experience being a musician in a comedy TV show from Do Not Adjust Your Set from the late 60s, his experience was that the people that actually did the filming didn't know what they were doing. They didn't know how to capture the performance on film, so that what he saw on the screen was never in line with what he thought it should look like. The way he would say it is, they never knew where to put the cameras, right? And so he told Eric Idle, no, I don't want to do it. When you do music in a thing like this, they never know where to put the cameras. And Eric Idle said, but you'll be putting the cameras there yourself. I'm going to let you do the whole thing. Oh, okay. And so Neil Innes signed on. And for every episode of Rutland Weekend Television, there's one or two bits in the show, 4 or 5 minute long segments of the show that are Neil Innes' songs that he is then filming a video, in essence, for that song. Now, promotional videos for music had been around for a while. Mostly, they were the kinds of things that would crop up on, like talk shows and stuff like that. They want to feature a song on American Bandstand, but they can't get the band in, so they'll play this promotional clip instead. Nobody thought of the promotional clip, which is what they were called. Nobody thought of the promotional clip as a product in and of itself. It was always a means. It was never an end. It was just this thing that, the important thing was I needed to get my song out. I needed to get my recording played on American Bandstand or Soul Train or Top of the Pops if I'm going to Britain. And nobody spent a whole lot of time worrying about those promotional clips. That it was a marketing tool. It was not an artistic form in and of itself. That started changing in the mid-'70s. And I'm not going to go so far as to say that Neil Innes made that change, but he is one of the very first to do it. And he's certainly the first to do it in this kind of a format where he is, keep in mind, this is 1975. He's doing music videos in 1975. There weren't music videos in 1975. But more importantly, by the end of the 70s, beginning of the 80s, music videos had become an art form. And the idea of having a television show that was just music videos, that is usually credited to Michael Nesmith, one of my big heroes. In 1979, Michael Nesmith, because he had been making videos for his own songs, and he saw the video as a distinct thing, right? It wasn't just a promotional tool. It was an actual avenue for artistic creativity. He thought, okay, well, what we need to do is we need to start stringing these things together. We need, you have a TV show that is just music videos. Instead of it being a side, a byproduct, let's have it be the main thing. And he came up with what he called pop clips, which was a TV show that aired on Nickelodeon from 1979. It was developed in 79. He said, checking his notes, it first aired in 1980. And then the year after that, essentially it was transformed into a station and became what we know of today as MTV. So when you do a little looking, you do a little digging, Michael Nesmith is usually the person who is cited as the creator of MTV. It's a fairly long process and there are iffy connections in there, but still, Mike Nesmith did create pop clips, which was, far as I know, the first self-contained, nothing but music videos show in the United States. There's the kicker. In the United States. As I mentioned earlier, Rutland Weekend Television had individual videos back in 1975. In 1978, Neil Innes recorded music for and started filming videos for a series that he had called the Innes Book of Records, which was a video show. The thing that was different was that these were all his songs. He would have, in each episode of Innes Book of Records, there was one, maybe two of the segments that were not his songs. Poets would read some of their poetry. Street performers would do whatever their busking act was. But the bulk of the series, the bulk of each episode was Neil Innes videos for his songs that he wrote, most of which that he, as far as I could tell, that he wrote specifically for the series. Innes Book of Records was developed in 78. The first episode aired in January of 1979. Pop clips didn't air until 1980. So once again, Neil Innes, a good year ahead of everybody else. A quick side note, all of the episodes of Innis Book of Records are available on YouTube. I strongly recommend you checking these things out. There are a few of them that are a little on the didn't age very well side, but for the most part, this is wonderful stuff. The songs themselves are great, and a lot of the videos are fantastic. Strongly recommend Innis Book of Records. So, Neil Innis, man ahead of his time. A good solid at least year ahead of everybody else throughout the 70s, which I just love. And like I said, next week I'm going to be doing a top 10. It might be a top 10 plus 10. You'll just have to tune in and see. But I'm finally going to get to his actual solo work as opposed to his work in bands and parody groups. So I hope you tune in for that. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, I'd appreciate it if you'd click the like button. If you have not already, go ahead and click the subscribe button. That would be awfully nice of you. If you do subscribe, click the little bell for notifications so that you'll know when I post these videos. Every Friday, my music video is posted. I don't have a specific time. Ooh, that's because it depends on when I get it done, obviously. But still, thanks a lot for watching, and I hope that the rest of your day is blissful. See you soon.